Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me. My name is Damian Brady, and I am a developer advocate at GitHub, which means I get to do awesome things like learn about all the features that the product team is putting together and get to teach you about them as well. So today, I'm here to talk to you about GitHub Actions and how we can do continuous delivery using this awesome tool that really makes your enterprise so much more powerful when it comes to software delivery. So let's get into it. So in today's session, we're going to talk about a few things. First, we're going to really look at what GitHub Actions is and what it can do. We're going to look at GitHub Actions specifically for CI/CD, and I'll show you what that actually looks like in practice as well. And then finally, we're going to look at what's new in GitHub Actions and then what's coming in the near future. So without any further ado, let's talk about what GitHub Actions is. So GitHub Actions, most people think about it as kind of a CI/CD platform, continuous integration, continuous delivery platform. And it is, but it's actually a lot more than that too. GitHub Actions is kind of your place for automating anything to do with your projects or your repository or even your organization. So the pitch really for GitHub Actions is it's a way of automating your workflows, everything from the ideas that you have in your organization all the way through to production. And while it's really, really good for CI/CD, it's also good for so many other things. The team that I'm on, for example, we have to manage a lot of projects and events. And so the team that I'm on uses a combination of issues and then workflows to do things like reformat those issues, notify the people that need to be told about them, and add labels and tags and all sorts of stuff to it. And this all happens through GitHub Actions, even though we're not doing any building of software or deployment of software. But we're here to talk about CI/CD in terms of delivery of your software projects and how it can help here. So I'm going to show you a demo in a little bit, but first off, let's talk about why you'd want to use GitHub Actions. Now, it's a fully integrated CI/CD platform built right into GitHub. What this means is that you get this full traceability all the way from the idea all the way through to deployment into production. And that's really powerful because it means that when something lands in production, a new feature, you can trace that feature all the way from the workflow that ran the deployment through to the build, the test that you ran, the issue that it solved, the commit that changed the code that implemented that feature, and even things like the discussion that your team had about that feature before it even became a real thing. We found that in practice, having effective automation and having effective DevOps processes like this and CI/CD using GitHub Actions leads to far better efficiency. So much faster merges and more merges. So the code that your team is writing gets into production a lot faster. In terms of DevOps, organizations with more mature DevOps practices tend to deploy so much more frequently and so much faster than ones with less mature DevOps automation. And they can recover from incidents far faster than all their competitors. So it's been said before, but if you're not doing DevOps to some extent, then you're really slipping behind your competitors, or you're going to. So GitHub Actions is a great way of performing the automation part of this as well. And again, not just CI/CD, but all the way through whatever your workflow looks like. So what does GitHub Actions actually look like in practice? And I think the best way to demonstrate this is actually to show you what it looks like. So I'm going to jump into a demo and we'll have a look at what GitHub Actions can do. So here I have my .NET project. It's hosted in GitHub, of course. So here is all my code. The code doesn't really matter for this demo. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new GitHub Actions workflow. So click on the Actions tab. And you can see I've already got a few that have run, but let's click on New Workflow so we can get started with a new one. And the first thing you'll see here is that there's a great kind of startup experience. GitHub Actions has analyzed my repository and realized that it's a .NET application. It uses Jekyll. It's given some suggestions about maybe where I want to deploy it. And so these are templates that it's given me as suggestions out of the box based on what's in my repository, which is really powerful. So if I wanted to deploy a .NET Core app to an Azure web app, then I can do that by configuring this. And it gives me a good starting point, especially if I'm not familiar with GitHub Actions. But let's choose a basic one just to demonstrate what's going on here. And we can see a few things when I choose this one. essentially we've got a starting point for building my .NET application. Right up here in the top, you'll notice that we've kind of got this folder path here. What GitHub Actions is doing is it's letting me define the workflow in a file that lives right there alongside my code. Now, this is really powerful as well, because it means if you fork this repository or clone the repository and you're a new starter to this project, you not only have the code that is for this application, but you have the way that it's built and the way that it's deployed alongside the code. If you work in a branch and that changes the way that you deploy your application, then those changes can be made in the branch alongside the code changes as well. So it's really useful to have that definition alongside the code. All right, let's continue on and have a look at the triggers. So we've given it a name, and right here we can see that this workflow will be triggered whenever we push to the main branch, or whenever there's a pull request against the main branch as well. Now, there's a huge number of these triggers as well. It's not just pushing and pull requests. If I press Control Space on a Windows machine, you can see I get autocomplete here as well. So I could do things like when there's an issue comment, I can run this workflow, or maybe even when I create a release. There's also a bunch of other ones that can be manual as well. So there's workflow dispatch and repository dispatch. And these ones allow me to have a manual process where I can click a button or hit an API endpoint to trigger a workflow run as well. So a lot of power there with the triggers. You'll see here that we've got our jobs, and then inside those jobs, we can name them. This is our build job, and it will we can choose where that build actually runs or where that job actually runs. Now, in this case, I'm using Ubuntu, the latest version of Ubuntu. So I have a few choices here. I can run it on Ubuntu machines with several different versions, Windows machines with different versions, even macOS, so hosted macOS ones. If these don't suit, I can also self-host my own runners on my own infrastructure. And this is super powerful if I need libraries or I need something installed on those build machines. If I have my own infrastructure which already has those resources installed, I don't need to worry about installing them each time. So we have a number of options for the runner that does that work. And then we have our steps for that job. And we can see these are a combination of just commands that can run. So in this case, we're doing a .NET restore, and that's just a command line execution. Or we have these actions that live here as well. Now you'll see there are a few that are actions checkout and actions setup.net. These ones are kind of default ones, but there are a lot of actions in this marketplace. So right over here, if I wanted to search for Azure, for example, you can see Azure Web App. So if I wanted to deploy to an Azure Web App, I can click on that and it will tell me exactly how I can use that, that action. But if I wanted to find other ones, there's a marketplace link right at the top of my GitHub window. Let's jump in there. And we can see if we look for actions at time of recording, and this was different than a couple of hours ago, there's 12,870 actions available. I could search for something like Azure and 163 different actions available for Azure. So a huge number of actions that can perform tasks that you might want to perform as part of your workflow. You can see a lot of these are by Azure themselves. So this is a verified publisher, which means that I can be a little bit higher trust. There's a little bit higher trust in what this action can do. It's a verified creator, was created by Azure. All right, let's jump back in here. And we can see we've got this file ready. We could commit this change either directly to the main branch or create a branch for it as well. But I'm just going to cancel out of this because we've done one ahead of time and you don't want to see me run through that whole process. So let's look at a workflow that I've already created. And I'm going to choose the publish workflow. Now this workflow here has been run a few times. It's got a workflow dispatch event trigger. What I'm actually going to do is click on the file itself. And this just brings me, this is just a shortcut of getting to the actual file in my repository. And we'll have a look at what this actually looks like. We can see that there are triggers. So when we publish a release and when we do it manually, so workflow dispatch is me clicking a button. And we've got some variables that we can pass in as well. So where to release, staging, or production, and that's a required field. We have two jobs here. We have a staging job for deploying to staging, and we have a production job for deploying to production. Let's look at the staging one first, and we can see right up here, there's an environment defined for this staging job. Now, environments are kind of a first-class citizen inside GitHub Actions that let you define a place where you're going to deploy your application. So in this case, we have one called staging, and we've even given it a URL. So if you wanted to go to that URL, you should be able to find it. We can do a bit more with environments, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But let's move on a little bit. And we can see a bit further down, we're using a publishing profile, which is stored in a secret. So GitHub Actions also gives you secrets management. And in fact, you can manage secrets across a number of different aspects of GitHub, from code spaces to actions, of course, and even environment-specific secrets. There's a number of different places where GitHub can manage those secrets. The great thing about this is that they are write-only. So you can't get somebody coming in and reading that secret out. Even if they appear in the logs from a workflow run, they'll get masked out as well. So you won't leak credentials just by somebody looking at your build logs. All right, let's move on to the production job here. And we can see that there's an if statement. So we get a bit of control over workflow as well. We've got an environment for production. And we've also got this needs element here as well. So what this means is that this job won't run until the staging job runs. By default, they'll just run in parallel. But because this needs staging, that staging job has to succeed first. And this is a way of doing dependent jobs, so phased kind of deployments as well. All right, let's have a quick look at those environments that we're deploying to here. I'm going to jump into environments, and you can see we've got two here. We've got staging and prod. And prod has a protection rule against it, which basically means before I can deploy to that prod environment, I've got a required reviewer, which is me, which means that it's not going to go to production until I actually review it. Or I can say, wait a certain amount of time. I can even restrict this deployment so it only comes from the main branch, for example. Let's say I only want my main branch to go to production, or a release branch if that's the way I'm working. And then I have specific publishing profiles, so those secrets that we saw before, that are scoped to those environments as well. So I can use that same variable in staging and production, and it will adopt whatever value I have for that environment. So we get a great way of kind of having repeatable workflows with different secrets. So what does this look like in practice? Well, I've actually done a deployment here, and I've stopped before approving it to production. So this is a deployment where I'm going to staging, and then it's waiting for my approval to go to production. So if I click on that link for staging, you'll see that we've got a purple background, which is great. But my production website, I can refresh this, is kind of this blue color, right? So the change was to change it to purple. So you can see that it hasn't hit production yet. We're still only in staging. I can jump back to my action or to my workflow run and review that deployment and say, yep, that looks good. And I'll say, ship it, approve, and deploy. And what that'll do is it'll continue that process and then deploy to production. Now, what's great is I get, as I mentioned, this traceability all the way through. So we can see that when I approved it, so I approved it to production now, obviously that will change in a little while as it goes. You can see it's deploying to production as we speak. And I can look at the logs, either live or what happened as we were going. So there's my deployment to staging. If I jump up to the prod deployment job, I can see that there's a step to download the artifact, and then it's deploying to production as well. So I get all of these logs in one nice place, and when it's complete, I'll end up with a deployment all the way through to production. So it looks like it's just finishing that off now. And if I click on that link and do a refresh, there we go. You now have that change in production. So that's what GitHub Actions looks like. I just want to give you a bit of a summary just to make sure that we've hit on all of those things that I went through during that demo. All right, so what we saw there was a few different aspects to GitHub Actions. We saw that the actions workflows themselves are defined in YAML. They can trigger on pretty much any event you can think of. We can run each job on a macOS machine, Linux, Windows, or self-hosted runners on any number of platforms. There's more than 12,000 actions in the marketplace, almost 13,000 actions in the marketplace that you can use, or you can run your own scripts. We have a robust environments, approvals, and secrets management process as well, which means that you can really trust that this is enterprise ready, ready to deploy your applications all the way out to production in a safe and efficient way. I want to highlight a couple of things that are new with GitHub Actions as well. So some things that are new. We saw that better getting started experience. So the analysis of your code to give you better suggestions when you go to create a workflow to start off with. We saw that, and that's really handy, especially for people who are unfamiliar with GitHub Actions. There's also a feature for reusable workflows. So I didn't show you this specifically, but that workflow that was running automatically actually used reusable workflows. So in each case, in each of those jobs, staging and production, I deployed to Azure. Rather than rewriting that code each time, that definition each time of how to deploy to Azure, I wrote it once and then I just called it from the outer workflow. And you can reuse these workflows within your own repository, and you can reuse them across your organization as well. Which leads me to the next point. You can share actions and workflows across your enterprise, which means that, once again, you only need to write something once. You don't need to repeat it for every repository that you're using as well. We've done a lot of change around self-hosted runners as well, and a lot of improvements. Some examples are job management hooks. So for example, if you're self-hosting a runner, you might want to run a script every single time a job starts, and then another script when it finishes, just to do some of your own cleanup. We have ephemeral runners, which basically means we have the ability to spin up runners as a job gets queued and then tear them down when the job is complete. We can limit runners to only run for specific workflows if you want certain runners on certain machines to only run for specific tasks. And we can disable automatic updates. So sometimes you don't want the latest version of the runner. You might want to just run an older version so you know exactly what's going to happen each time. We've also introduced partial reruns recently, which means that if a job fails, you can rerun just that job, or you can just rerun a single job in a process as well, or in a workflow runner as well, which can be really handy for troubleshooting. So those are some of the new things that we've introduced recently. There's a lot more stuff coming though. And here's a little pro tip. If you want to find out what's coming in GitHub across the board, have a look at our public roadmap. So there's two URLs there. The first one is the repository that holds all of the information about this public roadmap. But if you want to go straight to that project board itself that shows what's being deployed in which quarter, github.co/roadmap will take you straight to that project. There is a link from that first one anyway, if you forget that one too. So there's a lot in there, as I mentioned, but there's two things I really want to call out that I'm quite excited about to do with actions. One is organization and enterprise workflows. Now, it might sound like what I was talking about before with these shared workflows, but this goes one step further, and it allows you to create workflows in a centralized place and enforce running of those workflows in repositories, which means, let's say you have a security check that you want to run over every repository in your organization. Well, you can have that in a centralized place and enforce that running across repositories. That's the idea behind this, to really get that enterprise level governance that you really want as part of your repositories. The other one that I'm excited about is kind of an extension to runners. And this is new, more powerful GitHub hosted runners. So you could always self-host your runners and run them on whatever hardware you want. But we found people wanted some more freedom in the runners they had for GitHub hosted runners, so without needing their own infrastructure. So we've got a lot more, far more powerful options in private beta at the moment. Now, private beta means that it's kind of ready to go. We're releasing it very gradually to specific people. If you are interested in joining the private beta, please get in touch, either with your GitHub rep or with me, if you like, and I can pass that information on. We've onboarded 25 or so organizations at time of recording. Some of them are using well over 10,000 minutes a day of GitHub Actions runners on 8, 16 core machines. So they're doing a lot of work. We're in the future as well going to add GPU optimized runners. So if you have machine learning workflows, for example, that could be really handy. Right now, that's not in the private beta, but that is definitely coming soon. And that's something I'm super excited about as well. So there's a lot more coming. Check out the roadmap. There's some really exciting things, both with Actions and with the rest of GitHub's features. If you want to learn more about GitHub Actions, though, there's 2 places I'd recommend going. One is the GitHub docs. They're really good. They give you some great walkthroughs of, getting started with GitHub Actions if you're unfamiliar, or some of the intricacies if you are a little bit more experienced. The other place is Microsoft Learn. There's actually a GitHub Actions learning path that you can take as well for free. So check that one out if you want to just get started with GitHub Actions and learn how to use it yourself. So those 2 resources are there. And of course, if you did have any questions about anything I've spoken about today or GitHub Actions in general, I'm always available on Twitter, DamoVisa, or DamoVisa on GitHub as well. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you learned something and have a great build.